So welcome again to Cosmic Connections. We have with us Rachel Archelaus and myself, Harry Kroner. We are the hosts of Cosmic Connections. In today's subject, we're going to talk about hybrid children, between extraterrestrials and human. So we read a lot about this in all kinds of accounts and books and all different things that we read about and listen to. But it's really hard to put a face to it, or to really understand the concept without really having a first account for someone who has really encountered themselves. So we have Rachel with us, and she actually has experienced that herself. So I'm going to ask you several questions, Rachel, but why don't you go ahead and start telling us in general what was your experience with that?
So it's funny, just like in my regular ET connections, I was having a lot of contact with the hybrid programs long before I actually consciously knew that was happening. Like, for example, when I was younger, 5-6 years old, I remember my stomach being really puffed out and thinking that I was pregnant. And later in life, getting confirmation like that was part of, the whole hybrid program thing. And then I was just being really perceptive. And I've had some very odd experiences having to do with that program, but the actual connection with the children has been pretty interesting. I've had dreams where I've conceived hybrid kids and saw who I was partnering with. I've had connections with the actual children telepathically and through art and through seeing ships in the sky and kind of knowing that was like them kind of saying hello. So my experience is pretty varied, though I don't consider myself an expert in this because I don't really study it other than my experience. I talked to a couple of people about it, but so this is just really...
your experience. Well, yeah. I have read extensively on the subject years before I've met you. And I've actually had experience with some of my clients who are part of the hybrid program and have depicted very similar accounts of being in the ship. So maybe we'll start with, tell us a little bit more, if you remember consciously, even now or in retrospect, experiencing being on the ships or being taken first. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so my experience on ships has been coming back to me for the last couple of years. I was definitely, I understood what was happening as a kid and the fact that I would be screaming all night and my parents would not be able to console me and I wouldn't remember it in the morning. So all of that kind of fits in. But as far as what I remember from the ships myself, a lot of times my Uncle Brian was there, and it's funny because we actually look more similar than anyone else in my family. And we're both part of the hybrid programs. So I don't really remember a whole lot. I mean, I definitely remember like the Mantis people and being with the Zetas and the ships feeling very big when I was a little kid and like kind of seeing people all the way across the big room.
And what else was in the big room?
It was kind of like lined with, in like Star Trek, how they have those instrument panels below either a wall or like a big window. It kind of looked like that. It was very monochromatic, like very grayish, silverish.
You mentioned while you were on the ship, I think in one of our conversations, you mentioned seeing the other incubators or places where they grow the...
Oh, yeah. So that, I don't know if that was on a ship or not. It could have been, but yeah, I have a lot of memories from kind of like other lifetimes, not necessarily this lifetime, of seeing, where families are grown and having a better understanding of how Zeta families worked and how it was more of like an assignment when it wasn't necessarily like there were bonds, but it was a very dry, matter-of-fact feeling like you were paired together. It wasn't like what we experience here on Earth as like a family bond.
The emotional connection and that kind of stuff. It's just not as the same level.
Yeah, like you could definitely say there was a bond and you could call it emotional, but it was different. Nothing like we really have here. It's hard to explain.
That's okay. Yeah, it is hard to explain because it's just not the same experience. So tell me a little more about how your connection with what would have become your galactic children, your children of this hybrid children. So tell us a little more about that connection and encounters.
Yeah, so it was in a reading I did with the creators, channeled by Daniel Scranton, where he kind of validated a lot of what was going on for me with the hybrid children. That yes, I have them, and yes, when I was younger, that was being part of the program, um, and my interaction with them, I'm very telepathic, and they would pop in from time to time, so I was aware of their existence. And I started seeing ships around that time as well, and I kind of felt like, okay, that was them peeking their little head out of the clouds and saying hi. And also, I work with them nightly as like a teacher, facilitator, trainer, even for their caretakers up there. But let's see, my specific experience. I mean, I've just had little conversations with them and nothing big. I've never been really called to like prepare for them on earth. I know a lot of people are doing that. Like Bridget is doing that with her harmonious earth communities and kind of setting up places on earth for the hybrid children to come. I've always felt like I work with them on the other dimension. And so it's
Hmm.
not necessary for me to go that path. Um,
Yeah,
but whenever I've wanted to talk to the kids, they've been there and they're cheerful, they're happy, they're learning. It's like a lot of that childhood wonder that children here have, they have as well, and feel like they're even more excited than kids here because they're encouraged to learn and grow where they
understand.
are. Kids here are kind of stifled and they're not being stifled.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, so I just feel like this tremendous warmth and love from them whenever I check in, and they're doing fine, so I don't worry about them.
Yeah, I actually have being part of the quantum healing hypnotherapy community. We have actually met and talk in the forum. We have a lot of people who are reporting a lot of this cases of having communication with let's call it in the children or offsprings. And in one case, I know that this lady actually she actually has a direct connection with them on the ships, and she actually calls upon them consciously, and at night she goes there and they communicate with her and share with her and show her show her around the ship, and do have very kind of mostly telepathic connection, and appreciation for her role in this bigger world and universe that we live in. And then I think one of the important things to understand about this, a lot of people approach it with fear, as if it's something that wasn't approved or allowed. And I think it's really important to know that all of these connections, even though a lot of them are not conscious, and a lot of people will tell you they're not conscious of it for most of their lives, and there's fear involved in the actual encounter sometimes, especially as young children. But it is all made with a certain agreement, a certain spiritual agreement that was done even before we came here. So it's important for people to understand that this is not done without permission, without agreeing to do it and being part of this really fairly extensive program that brings so much into all that we are becoming as a species. This is an acceleration, not only for their service. A lot of people think, oh, they're just doing it, taking our DNA and doing it for their service. No, it is an enhancement of everything, and they are partly human, and they are an extension and you can say a newer branch of humanity that is highly evolved, and it's going, and it is still representing us in many different ways, and we have to accept that as in just a continuation of sorts of our own in just different branches, different ways. And So I think it's important to give the perspective onto this whole thing, and not just feel like it's just being, again, some sort of a rape or something that is unpleasant. It is unpleasant when the fear is involved, but it is agreed upon on higher levels in our consciousness and spirit. So
That's true. Yeah, it's definitely by permission, from higher self to higher self. But I think I want to mention some things, especially for women who have been part of these programs, mainly the Zeta one, because the Pleiadian hybrid program does exist, and it's a little bit different though. It's not so physical. It's much more light body to light body,
yeah,
you know.
kind of
But a
astral
lot
plane.
of women have experience of trauma feeling like a sexual assault.
Hmm.
And that can be kind of hard to overcome. I remember growing up being very modest. Like, I wouldn't like unbutton the top button of a polo shirt. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had this inner feeling of being violated
Mm,
and looked at and taken advantage of. And even though it was permission based, of course, my humanness didn't know that. My
yeah.
conscious being wasn't aware of that. And so I unconsciously felt what was being, you know, taken, right? My
Yeah.
part of my body was being taken out, um and used as well as a carrier vessel. And if you're having a dissonance there, like if you're not conscious of what's going on and you're not conscious that it's a love-based thing, but you can feel in your body that something is happening that's kind of beyond your control, it's a very upsetting thing. And I don't think that this is happening now. I'm pretty sure that a lot of this is dried up and not really continuing. But if you're listening, you may have those memories, or you may remember feeling like that in high school. Or, well, for me, it was in high school, middle school age, but for you, whenever it happened. And just kind of be aware of that. And you can now kind of maybe do some healing around that and know that everything's fine. Nothing really happened. That was, you weren't like raped at the dentist's office or something, because that's what you could think happened. You never know,
Yeah.
because those feelings are definitely there and they're valid. But now you can maybe
Yes.
put together where they came from.
Definitely validating it, because it is very deep, personal. At that point, feels like violation, and that's important to address it and not comb over it. Yeah. I was wondering if there's anything else that you want to mention as part of this, being part of it. How does it feel now as you are looking backwards and looking at it? How are you shifting your mindset over it, and what do you feel um, is your about your role in it?
Well, there's kind of a lot to that, because I'm part of the Zeta program. I'm part of the Pleiadian program. I myself am a Pleiadian hybrid. I didn't grow up on a ship per se, kind of, but I was altered here after I was born. Actually, no, when I was in utero, um, inside my mother. And so growing up as a hybrid has been interesting in itself. But being part of the program, it feels good. It's almost like I'm serving my country, right? Like, people go into the service and they do things that maybe are uncomfortable or not the normal thing that everyone would do. And this is kind of the same thing. I've had experiences that were very uncomfortable, and to the logical mind wouldn't make sense of why would you do that. But I'm happy to have been of service in that way and kind of added my DNA into the mix. And the other thing is, it requires a lot of faith. I need to have a lot of faith in my brethren on different star systems that they're going to take care of me, and they're going to put me back when they take me, or make sure everything is all healed up and correct, because they really are doing things to your body. And
Yeah.
one of the scariest things that happened to me just happened a couple of years ago, the beginning of last year, actually. I was having some menstrual issues and like bleeding very often. And I just couldn't get my stomach to go flat. And I'm a pretty thin person, so I noticed these things really quickly. And it lasted for so long, a couple months, where I was just bleeding like at least once a week, and I'd have periods like in between periods. And it was just really disconcerting because I take really good care of myself and I don't go to standard doctors. That's another show, but it was really freaking me out. I mean, and I was even having these weird symptoms of like smelling weird. Like I smelled like syrup and I smelled like must, and it was like all these weird symptoms. And I had a feeling that it was my little friends doing something, but I had no idea what it could be. And so finally I kind of got really scared. And I finally asked my angel friends, like, please tell me what's going on. And so I was doing this. I was in bed, and I normally talk to my guides and angels then because it's just easier. So my angels were there. I asked them what was going on, and they said, we need to bring in the Pleiadians. And so I said, okay. So they brought in the Pleiadians, and they told me that, they lifted this baby up out of me in different dimensions. So not physically, they didn't lift anything physically up, but they showed me what was in there. And I was like, oh, and they said, it's not ready yet. And so they put it back in. But then a couple weeks later, it was gone and I was fine. My stomach was flat. And I'd never heard of that happening before. Not even in what I told you about the session I had with the creators. They didn't mention that. And I didn't obviously have bleeding symptoms when I was 6. I didn't have a period yet. And so I was pretty freaked out. And a couple months later, maybe 1 or 2 months later, I was reading the book Custodians by Dolores Cannon. And I think 3/4 of the way through that book, there's an example of that exact thing happening to another woman. And so I got my validation there. But it was horrifying to go through, not having any idea that that's what was happening. So that is a story of, you have to have faith because you never know what's going to happen. And I do trust them. Once I knew it was them, I was fine. Internally, I wasn't freaking out anymore, but I didn't even think to ask at first,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've read actually a lot about this, and it's kind of a consensus that it looks like that they keep it in the human body for about 3 months, and then they transfer it into to continue the growth somewhere else. It seems like this is a period that is a must, and it's the most important in the development of the baby, and the crucial elements of a baby in the first 3 months, as we know. So it is seems like they have chosen to do that, and I've read numerous accounts of people, women who have experienced that and had 3 months that felt like as if they just had a miscarriage or something like that. And they had, so it feels exactly like that. It feels like a miscarriage, like you got pregnant and you got a miscarriage. And women who are in the program, and that happened to them several times enough, not like incessantly, but definitely several times in their life as they participate in the program. So it's something to acknowledge and see and you said, like as you said, trust in the process. But it is hard to have that, as you said, that dissonance between clear knowing and just being like what is happening to me. So it's important to acknowledge that. Okay, let me ask you another question. I want to ask you if you, what do you remember at the time you spent on the ships, while, as you mentioned, educating them, teaching them on the ships. So what was the subject? What was the things that you have taught them?
So that is what I do at night. I'm normally sleeping. Though I can do stuff multidimensionally while I'm awake. It's interesting to do that. I don't So I don't really recall all the time what I'm doing up there. I have been told that I help them with emotional integration,
Mm.
and that these kids have emotions. They are born very much like a human, so they have that full range of excitement and fear and sorrow and jubilee and everything that you can think of that you've experienced in your life. And the caretakers that are up there, the Zetas, that is all very new to them, and they do not have the wide range of emotions that we do, even though now they are connected to their emotional bodies. So helping them deal with the kids and helping the Zetas integrate their emotions is what I'm mostly focusing on, because I've had that experience here of having so much Zeta influence in this life for me, and also being a human. I've had to go through that myself. So I guess that's what my specialty is up there. But other than that, just, playing with them and answering their questions. They're very smart. They ask amazing questions. They're really fun to be around. Um, and they're learning all sorts of stuff, like how to eat and how to play and how to kind of fit in a little bit. And they're kind of learning about how to be on Earth,
Mm.
and they're also being taught about their abilities, their psychic and telepathic and all those abilities. And so one of my jobs is to observe and just take notes and kind of see how the progress is going. So you could kind of say I'm a counselor
Yeah.
and facilitator, emotional trainer, that kind of thing.
Very good. Now, and when they are in that, I want to mention that I don't think we mentioned it before, that the Zetas are what we call the Greys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, for those who haven't listened to the other podcast.
And there are many different kinds of Zetas too. I just want to
Okay.
say that, like, there are tall ones and short ones, and there's a lot of different kinds of Zeta beings.
Okay. And I know that, like, for example, the mantid, the mantoid race, they're really, really tall, correct?
Yeah, and very long and spindly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very, very tall, like 18 feet tall. And Zeta's range, as you said, like from smaller species, which are 4 or 5 feet, like 3 to 5 feet tall, and to larger species, 6 to 7 feet tall, 6 to 8 feet tall, right?
I think there are smaller ones too, but yeah, that's mainly what I've encountered.
Very good. All right.
And I have seen like the mantis people smaller,
Mm-hmm.
more like taller humans, like 8 feet tall. But I don't know if that's just how they were projecting to me. Really, these beings can kind of do whatever they want. They can project
Right.
however they want, um, and so yeah. But what your guidelines are, definitely
Just about.
the norm. Yeah.
And I want to thank you very much, Richard, for sharing this very, very personal experience, because it is important to put it out there and have other women understand this, and other people who are involved in it, and keep it as if like a secret, or not understanding what is happening to their bodies, to allow them to know and understand the greater picture that they're involved. So thank you very much for doing this.
You're welcome. I really wished I had something like this. Um, a long time ago. And I know that there are some amazing pioneers, like I mentioned Bridget earlier. She's amazing in what she's doing about her work with the hybrid children and making all of this normal, because this is normal. Like, this is happening in your everyday life. You're not, dreaming it up. If you have feelings that maybe this happened to you, then investigate them, because it'll add so much um, trust in yourself when you know that, okay, I had this feeling and it was right. Then you're going to live a much better life, instead of just thinking that you're crazy or ignoring it and thinking, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, nothing happened to me. That kind of stuff can really eat away at your self-confidence, and I think that's terrible. So
Yeah.
I hope this helps.
Yeah, very good. And I've also want to mention that this is a worldwide phenomenon that happened until about 10, 15 years ago. And then that program seemed to have been stopped. And we've got several confirmations from actually many different sources that this type of program, at least especially with the Zeta, has, so as though you can say like the regular abductee kind of experience, has been stopped. And I don't know if it's because, well, several major reasons, because they reached a point in which they had enough of what they needed. And the second level is because they realized, based on the publicity it received, that it was causing a major fear among humanity overall, and they really wanted to stop the fear factor, which is hindering the evolution of humanity and the progression of their integration into our lives in a more conscious way. So they decided to stop this program. So right now, just people know this is not happening anymore. But as you said, anybody who was born 15 years and up ago might be part of this program. And again, this is a worldwide. And I know of cases, I know of myself of some clients that have been born different places around the world. And this is not just some subconscious fear or misunderstandings or just kind of things people read in some books and start to fantasize about. I really want to validate this. This is happening to people that have no idea about this, did not research it, did not read about it, were not exposed to this literature in any way, shape, or form prior to understanding their own experiences. So really wish people understand and take it very seriously and know that this is something that is happening, and not on the conspiracy level. I really want to make sure that this, it's really important to distinguish the two. If you really notice, and maybe we should dedicate a whole podcast to the conspiracy stuff, but I notice that a lot of people are really developing and working on the fear level. And if you notice anything that is involved with fear, which is anything to do with conspiracy, no matter if it has a hint of truth or not, if it's involved with like, no, that kind of like it's fear or being manipulated, it is something that is involved with the fear. Reduces the vibration. It is a lower vibration look at things, and it is far from the truth. The truth is, the pure truth is usually involved with love. And this is really how our universe operates. So I want to make sure people understand it. Stay away from conspiracy stuff, even when you see it on the net, because these days, unlike when we were younger, it was almost impossible, except for like very rare books to read about this, which I hunted for. I remember, like, very much so. But these days, it's so much information and a kind of plethora of information. But it's a lot of it is mistaken and taken from the consciousness level of fear and distorted in that way. So it's important to see it in a way, and especially we're talking about like this subject, which is very personal, very intimate, to take it with a grain of salt, whatever you read out there, and just take things as they are. And I thank you so much for doing this and showing the world that this is not something that is terrible, or that it brings suffering for no reason to our people.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about what the program was all about. Should we give a quick synopsis of that?
Yes.
Because that really helped me understand it more. And my sister, who grew up really frightened of ETs, which of course I did not. I didn't have any opinion of them. I was kind of neutral about it. But she was really frightened. And when she heard the story, she really started to feel better and heal that connection. Where now she's more accepting of it, and she's on board about the whole love your brethren thing. So in a nutshell, the Zetas, at least, are our future cousins, basically. They're an evolved form of humans, and because of how they lived and where they lived, they altered their appearance so that they could survive. And they sorry, sometimes when I start talking about this, I get a little like vibrational shift, and I forget some human words. It's so funny. Procreate. They procreate through cloning. And after so many generations of doing that, that DNA can start to diminish and break down. And so they couldn't clone anymore. So basically, we made an agreement with them as being a partial match to their DNA, right? Because we're cousins and they're, future humans, that we would supply our DNA to them so that they could procreate once again. So that's why they harvest eggs from females and sperm from males, and they mix it all together to create new hybrid beings. And so that's basically what has been happening. And of course, it's all, again, permission based, though how they did it, because they didn't have an emotional body at the time. They had no idea that they were freaking us out. Just think about, I like to use the analogy of taking your cat or your dog to the vet, right?
Yes.
If you have a cat or a dog, you have to do things that keep them well, or that they, would want eventually, they'd want to stay healthy, that freak them out. My cats hate going to the vet. They are terrified. They pee in their cage. I mean, it's pretty awful. And, even all the homeopathic stuff that I give them doesn't work to ease their tension. We're the same way. The Zetas came, they plucked us out of our beds, they took us to the ship, doing what we said we would do. However, it was still traumatizing. So that's basically in a nutshell what happened. They've since started integrating their emotional body. So now they understand what they did and they're very sorry about it. They love us so much. They are basically family and they think of us as family. They care very much about us. So it was unintentional what they did. It served the greater good regardless, because we got to process a lot of our fear. And so that's basically it. You want to add anything?
No, you did it perfectly. And just to give a similar explanation about regarding our history and how they go back, it's like us going back to Roman times and starting to take some samples from that because of something that we needed a little more raw material. And to be honest, if you think about it, if we're going to go now with our aircrafts and go back to Roman times and take them to a medical facility, it'll look really, really frightening to them. And they would not be able to understand what the hell happened. They came to like some hovering crafts over them. And so it really is not so far in our future that those are again, it's not even cousins. It really is, as we said, we're kind of going through time and kind of recreating ourselves and what will become, again, that hybrid civilization. I would leave it at that. So it's really is that it's that simple. It's just given that I'm happy you did that, and we given this perspective so people understand that this is not so well, it is out of this world, but it's
yeah,
but it is more there's a better comprehension of it, and when you give it that kind of examples and perspective, so it's not that foreign to us, the whole concept and the reasoning and the purpose of it. So thank you very much for doing this, and I hope the audience enjoyed this and learned a lot from this. If you want to leave some comments on the podcast, please do so, and we'll have some more coming up very soon. If you have anything else you'd like to add or share in your own stories, your own experiences, if you have questions for me or Rachel, please just leave comments with the podcast, or contact us in our own websites. My website is harrykroner.com, and for you, Rachel, it's sephyrus.com.
Yep, SEPHYRUS.com.
Very good, excellent. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy us and join us again very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.